we are obviously in a hotel, everybody watching for our Miami game. Gonna bang out part 3 here of our technique school. So just to review, we've gone through our clean technique stuff, which was part 1, all of our platform movements. We all feel pretty good about that stuff. We've gone through that. I guess I got a good idea of that. Last week we went over our bilateral squat progression, which kind of covers 3 basic movements, which are what? 3 squats?
Back squat, front squat.
And overhead squat. So back squat, front squat, overhead squat. And you could really coin all these and put these all together because this is going to be probably pretty brief. But you know, the unilateral squat is a different beast. I would say just from my experience, I think the unilateral squat is you see more immobilities. I think it isolates immobilities a lot better than a bilateral squat. You know, I think overhead squat is, if I were to pick one to see immobilities, more deficiencies, I think the overhead squat is one of the best assessment tools there is. But you can really see a lot of unilateral deficiencies when you do look at unilateral movements. Obviously, I think we probably don't talk enough about the unilateral squats. You know, I mean, 80% of our sport is played on you know, 1 foot in the ground at all times. So I think seeing how, you know, force is produced and absorbed, correlation to sprinting, I think it's something that we need to probably talk more about more often. So I just thought, let's separate this, even though obviously the you know, the general modality of movement is the same. I just thought, let's separate the unilateral stuff and let's take an episode to really just emphasize part 3, if not for anything else, just to make sure everybody really understands how important this is and how we probably don't do enough of this in our programming. Or you know, it's just like, we got Bulgarian split squats and we kind of turn our minds off. Or sometimes our coaching eyes off, whereas if I said, all right, let's back squat, everyone's like, okay, let's get after it, let's start back squatting. So when it comes to us, obviously when we program unilateral movements, we have a plethora of them. In our technique school though, we really narrow it down to 2 specific unilateral movements, which are what?
Lateral Bulgarian.
So we have a lateral squat and a Bulgarian split squat, or almost as we really coach it as just a single leg squat. We have more of a compact Bulgarian split squat when we teach it here. The back foot is completely relaxed, and we're really just trying to isolate the unilateral or the single leg as we do that. So the movements through the template and through the technique school is the same as everything else. So we start with what when we're teaching a lateral lunge and a Bulgarian split squat? We start with an ISO, okay? And for a guy to pass, he needs to be able to hold the bottom position of either lateral lunge or a Bulgarian split squat for 10 seconds. As they progress into week 2, they need to be able to hold it for 15 seconds. Okay? And these are all body weight movements, right? All right, then as we progress out of that, we'll add what? We'll add some weight, so we'll start progressing into weighted movements. And as we shift out of just a plate, we'll actually start weighting it with dumbbells and make it to where it becomes an actual movement. So why don't we just kind of start off by going, let's start with lateral lunge, and let's just discuss that bottom position. Harris, you want to just kind of start off here? So as we're in our lateral lunge position, we always talk about our top position is feet together, because we always want to return to that position. So Harris, why don't you just pop up here? So we always want to start feet together because we wanted to return to that. We wanted to finish the exercise, we wanted to finish the movement. We're always going to coach what with our feet? So we want to keep square feet. Why do we want to keep square feet? Mobility, right? So if I were to externally rotate the foot in my step out, if I were to externally rotate the foot, what does that do? It opens the hips up. Okay, so it's kind of what we talk about. It's a way of almost cheating the movement, or not necessarily cheating the movement, but cheating the joint dysfunction. So especially while we're teaching these guys this body weight movement, we want to keep them square. Now, a guy like Jamal Davis, a guy who he's duck-footed, okay? If you watch, I mean, he's like, we talk about hip anatomy, right? We talk about hip anatomy squats. He's a guy that can't even do body, and it's because his, like I said, his femurs are externally rotated at all times, and that's how he is. So there's guys that are going to have to be individualized when we're doing these movements, and you guys will see that. You'll have to be able to be aware of that kind of stuff and continue to get better at seeing that stuff as you guys watch this. But when we coach it, we want to keep feet square. We want to work, so we put them in a situation where they have to work ankle mobility, they have to work hip mobility, they have to have good thoracic spine mobility and keep an upright chest. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to help them out in this ISO, and we're going to give them a counterbalance movement. So, or sorry, a counterbalance weight. So we would give Harris within this ISO position, we give him a 5 or 10 pound plate that he'd be holding out. For now, he's just going to lock his thumbs in, set his lats. So we don't have any weights in here, obviously. But imagine day one, we're going to just give him a counterbalance so that it'll help him to understand the motor patterns movement. So we always want to start feet together. Obviously, he's going to take a step out. He's going to sit, and the first thing we're going to talk about is what? First thing he's going to do that we always do, coach. He's got a hip hinge. We'll stand back up, coach. So we want to watch that hip hinge movement, and instead of watching, which sometimes you'll see that knee pop this way, right? We're going to step out, and you'll see it a lot. And we want to sit back, and he's got to really work. So sometimes I'll help him out there, and like I said, I'll just come and stand right in front of him. Go ahead and step back up, coach. And I wanted to make sure that he's not hitting my legs. The coaching cue that leads you to really get a sit back. But like I said, the best thing about our technique program that you guys should be noticing is everything all intermingles, right? Everything, the coaching cues don't change anywhere, whether we're doing a lateral lunge, whether we're doing a Bulgarian split squat, whether we're doing a hang clean, it's all the same coaching cue, right? Hip hinge, sit back. So every movement we start, we want to see the hips hinge in a posterior fashion. So we talk about feet square, we talk about hip hinge, and then we talk about upper body that we want to keep. So we're going to sit him down in this ISO position. We're just going to take a step out, and we're just going to hold this for a 15 count. Okay, I want the back leg to be long. A lot of times you'll see this back leg start bending a little bit. I want to keep that back leg long, and both these feet are square. A nice upright torso, a flat back, and we're always going to teach them to set the scaps. Because right now, coach is pulling his thumbs apart right now, and this is, like I said, this is helping him engage his lats, helping him set his scaps. We got neutral eye position. Just said you want to look at the knee position here. I don't want the knee too far out in front of the toe, so we sit back there. And then we're looking at parallel position. So when we're looking at parallel position, what are we looking here? Okay, so what a lot of mistake I think people make. How you doing down there, coach? How you doing down there? Okay. A lot of mistakes I think people make is they always look at top of the thigh, and then when top of the thigh parallels the ground. What we're looking for here is we're looking at hip capsule to the center of the knee capsule, and I want that parallel with the ground, if that makes sense. You guys see the line that I'm talking about there? Now for us, coach, you still doing okay? Okay, for us, the issue with that is sometimes you get these guys, especially football players, or any weightlifters in general, but they have these giant quads, right, and have these giant hamstrings. So if you're looking at top of the thigh, Coach Harris has giant quads, stand up, okay, well that might look parallel, or he might have to go way below parallel if you're looking at the top of the thigh to get down there. So what I want to do is I just want to look at hip capsule, knee capsule, and I want to just center, and that's what I'm looking for parallel there, okay? Stand back up. What questions do we have on the lateral lunge specific? Like I said, man, at this point in time, you guys have seen, we've been through the bilateral stuff. There's not a huge change here, right? And there shouldn't be. If we're doing a really good job of coaching this stuff, these coaching cues, the issues, the feed the monster, everything we talk about, it should all correlate, right? It should all transfer over. You guys should start to understand that, start to see that these movements and these modalities, they're all intertwined. They all connect, and that's why we piece it together. We do it. It's the same thing that we try to use, and you guys notice, in our summer conditioning program, in our sprints, like we try to use the same coaching cues with breathing and setting our scaps that we do in the weight room that we cross over onto the field. Anything you guys have that glaring over the lateral lunge that you guys have trouble coaching or seeing, or
some guys that won't push their butt back, they'll have that little bit of knee valgus, or they'll have that anterior knee bend. And then guys that won't keep that back foot flat, and they'll start to like roll up on the inside of their foot, and then they'll put a lot of pressure on the inside of that knee.
Yeah, so I mean, a big thing that I like to do to alleviate that, and you guys see, so with our guys who like had sprained ankles, and this is a really cool thing to see. A guy that we had a couple high ankle sprains early on in the season, but we had lateral lunges in our program. They couldn't lateral lunge flat on the ground, but when I took one of our bumper plates and laid it and then lateral lunge on top of that, that just, what did that do? It, right, it elevates the ankle, so it decreases the degree at which the ankle's gonna have to flex. So all of a sudden now a guy that couldn't do a lateral lunge because of an actual ankle injury can now do it because I elevated that one step. So you guys can imagine this, you guys watching. Okay, this foot is still flat on the ground, and I just laid a bumper plate out here, so they would step onto the elevated bumper plate. Now, what Coach Owens is saying, I also like that as a teaching tool, because some guys who don't have mobility or the motor pattern to do it, if you do that, it allows them to understand what that hip hinge is, and it allows them to create torque. Because sometimes guys lose that torque, like we talked about, right? We talked about bilateral squat. What is creating torque? What is that? What are we doing when we're creating torque?
Heels.
We're twisting the feet out, right? We're turning the dinner plates out. So we're externally rotating the hips. Hips are externally rotating out. When we sit down in our squat, we want to do that same thing, but on a lateral lunge, if a guy has immobile hips or immobile ankle, he'll have a really hard time creating a torque, and that's when you'll see these guys come out and you'll see their knees valgus in, or you'll see them really shift up far, because they're, like I said, they're trying to find some place to compensate for the immobilization. So honestly, what I liked is I like stepping on the plate and letting them allowing them to understand that motor pattern. So I think that's a great coaching cue. Like I said, if you have guys that have sprained ankles, just elevating that is a big piece of it, and works same with reverse lunges too. Anything else on the lateral lunges specific that you guys see or coaching wise? I mean, obviously there's massive, the thoracic piece of it comes into play massively with the lateral lunge, and go ahead, coach, give me another rep here. So just a lot of times you'll notice that guys, when they go down and find that, they'll compensate hip mobility, and their thoracic will just drop over. They cannot keep an upright chest in this position, and you'll see that a lot. Some of that is T-spine mobility. Some of that is T-spine motoring patterns. A lot of it is in the hip, a lot of it is in the ankle. But the great thing is lateral lunge will definitely help you. You can use lateral lunge a lot to point those things out. And a lot of times with me, what I do with those kind of guys is the front rack position that we talked about on the bilateral squat, how we'll teach that before we let them put a bar on their back. It's the same thing with the lateral lunge. If a guy's having a really hard time keeping that chest upright, just stick a bar right on his delts, stick it out, butt back, chest has got to stay up as he squats down. So that's a great piece for the lateral lunge as well. What else there?
How do you know the difference between a mobility issue and like an anatomical issue? Like, you know, there's some dudes, like I know, for example, like personally, I remember I couldn't squat with my toes straight ahead, and then after, you know, mobility and distraction, I was able to sit down with my toes straight ahead. So like Jamal Davis, we talked about, obviously he walks duck-footed, but you know, you'll see guys eventually, like their first rep, they'll go to sit down and they can't help it. But then, you know, as we go, it'll start getting better. How do you differentiate the two, like when you're going about trying to fix it or alleviate it?
Yeah, I don't think that you necessarily always can. Like, you know, like I think that's one thing that me and our AT were talking about, like with Zach Geiser, and he said, well, I think he might have lesions in his hip, and that's why. So your hip anatomy, you can have two different kind of lesions, which are more or less bony growths that stick off the side of your femurs. Well, are on the head of your femur inside the actual hip capsule. And if those lesions get bad enough, or you put them into bad positions, that's where you get hip labrum tears, and it's not a good situation. So obviously, it's like how I like to describe it is, you guys know the highway bridges that go over top of the highway. Well, if your highway clearance is 12 feet and you're trying to put a 14-foot semi truck in there, imagine that 14-foot semi truck trying to grind underneath that bridge. That's how I like to envision when hip anatomy is not proper to be doing those movements. That's what it's like, just freaking grinding, and that's just, it's to give you a visual. It's not something that we want. So, you know, it's a tough question to answer, I think. I think some of it's obvious, you know, like you obviously know when you see a tight hip versus when you see something that looks a little fishy. For me, I definitely look at walking gait, like, you know what I mean? So like if a guy's walking gait, running gait, squat gait, if everything is externally rotated, I'm gonna start to assume there might be something bigger to the picture than just a really big hip mobility. If you're a guy that will walk or do certain movements with where the immobility like isn't flaring, like, you know, you're like, that's not apparent, but then you put him in a certain position and it's apparent, then maybe that might be an immobility in that particular situation or that particular joint angle or that particular movement. But I don't necessarily have like all the necessary right answers for that. You know, some, like I said, the PNF hip distraction stuff, like I really like that because you can really see, you know, what's going on there. But I don't have like a key for you to say, okay, this is definitely anatomical hip deficiency versus this is just an immobile hip. You know, I don't have something put together yet where I can say, okay, he checks off these three, it's just immobilization, or nope, he's got a cat lesion. Like that's just what he's got. It's for sure a cat lesion. Like as far as I know, the only way we can for sure know those things is via MRI. You know, so it's a tough game to play sometimes. But you know, we had. So just something that, you know, it's unfortunate it happened for us, but you guys haven't seen Yusuf Barakat train yet, but obviously you guys know Yusuf. Well, he presented as just tight hips, you know, but he's he's had cat lesions now for, you know, his whole life. He's been having cat lesions in his hips, so, and he's got both torn labrums in his hips because of those. So, you know, I look back on it, it's like, man, if we would have known this kid had these two lesions, would we have squatted him? Would we have done some of the things that we did with him? Could we have prevented? How long have the labrum tears been there? And all these questions are going through your head, and it's just like, man, how the heck would we have known? You know, if he comes up to you and says, my hip flexor is tight, you stretch his hip flexor and his hip feels better, you know, he gets an acute response from it. You think, okay, it's just his hip flexors are tight. And then you find out a couple years later that this kid has, like I said, two bony lesions growing off the head of his femur, and it's causing him to have labral tears, and it's like, you know, so I don't have a great answer. I just don't. I obviously think it's much more so hip mobility issues than it is obviously anatomical dispositions, but for me, any kid that I've ever seen that is duck-footed or bow-legged, or, you know, has a collapsed arch, like those are the kind of things I look for when, okay, we have an anatomical issue here. If a guy's got, you know, what seems to be a normal insertion, normal origins, normal walking gaits, I'm gonna lean more towards it being immobility, you know what I mean, not anatomical. Does that make sense?
Another thing too is like, Use is one of those guys that will push through anything.
Yeah.
And like when he's coming to you and telling you that he's hurting, it's pretty bad. Because I mean, he's one of those guys that'll lie on a Borg scale for anything. Like, oh, I'm like at a 2 out of 10 right now. Like visually, I can see that you're not at a 2. You're like at an 8 or a 9 right now. Like you're hurt. And for him to say that, like he's under pressure, that's a lot. But when you are like working on something like that,
It's tough.
it's
I mean,
tough. It's tough to figure out.
He's a kid, so I mean, like I said, you guys haven't trained Yusuf yet, but he didn't report any anatomical dispositions. His walking gait was normal. His squat, bilateral, unilateral, his sprint
Kept getting stronger too.
and yeah, made a ton of progress in the weight room.
Even his lateral movements.
Yeah, and I mean now you would see the only I'd say this, and I wouldn't say this. He would have a tough time getting into hip flexion, and you'd see that when he would run. Like, you know, I call it like ice skating. You know, usually your big boys like are those ice skaters. You know, the guys that can't pick their knees up, and he was like that. So he would come in and we would do extra hip flexor work, working hip flexion with him. And then the whole last year everything started getting really bad. So we just started, I stopped squatting him. We started shutting him down. There was anything that was particularly bugging him that he would feel. But I mean, there was nothing that ever was like, the only thing that I was ever really kind of worried or concerned about with him was hip flexion. Like when it was sprinting, that was it. Like, you know, he could hip flex. If you just had him stand there in a max velocity position and have him pick his knee up, he'd go above 90 degrees, no problem. But when he would sprint, he'd have the issue. So like I said, I just thought it was either technical, neuromuscular, or like a strength deficiency. And he was pretty mobile. I mean, Green worked with mobility all the time. So his hip mobility wasn't that bad. And that's when we really started saying, okay, there might be something else here. Because he was tight when he first got here, and then he started presenting mobility issues once we corrected the mobility, if that makes sense. And so, like I said, anytime you see something like that, you gotta, but it's not always apparent, and maybe as I get older and better at this, I'll have a better answer to that. But like I said, more than not, obviously, it's going to be a immobility. I mean, like I said, it's what I talk. I don't know if I think I've told you this before, but it's like kids sit down all day. Okay, anytime that we're in a seated position and my knees are sitting above my hips, okay, my hip flexors are pinching. They're shortening. They're freaking getting tacked together, and it's not a good thing. So here's how I like to do it. So bend your guys, put your butts back like this. Take this extra skin right here. Okay, you guys see it, feel it? That extra skin you got right there. I want you to pinch it. Put it in your hand. So pinch that extra skin. You got that skin in your hand? Okay, now try to stand up. All right, you feel that? That's what happens to your hip flexors when you sit down all day, okay? And from the time we're kids, time to come up, that's just an idea. So you have to start to imagine what sitting like this does all day when your knees are elevated above your hips and you're in a massive state of flexion. Your hip flexors are shortening, so you stand up, that has postural issues, that has pelvic tilt issues. So you're gonna see, especially through our careers, because of the kids we're getting, because of everyone sitting down so much, being at desks all day, we're gonna have a ton of hip mobility issues. It's just part of the name of the game, you know what I mean? And that's a great example. So more than not, your hip is gonna be the issue, your hip mobility is gonna be the issue. And we just have to correct it. So why don't we just go through some of our favorite hip mobility corrections right now? How's that sound? Okay. So let's just do hip floss first. Okay, so I'll just go through a couple of our favorite hip mobility correctors. So coach is gonna put this in leg, just wrap it right along the butt cheek. All right, go ahead and face the opposite from me. Coach, face the other way. Face me. Okay, that's his back knee. All right, now the big thing and the big mistake I see people make here, so he's just gonna bring his hips through and he's gonna flex his left butt cheek, okay? That's like the most essential thing here. If he's not flexing his left butt cheek, but he's just pushing his hips through and letting his back hyperextend, all right, you're not gonna get that hip stretch, all right? But if he wants, so we wanna keep a relatively neutral posture, he's gonna push his hips through and he's gonna flex his butt cheek. As soon as you flex your butt cheek, you flex your glute, you're gonna feel that psoas, you're gonna feel the iliacus, you're gonna feel that the hip flexor, the quad, you're gonna feel just freaking light up. But if you don't flex the butt, you're not gonna feel it. So this is one of my favorite things to do, all right? From here, we'll progress this to what we call a wall quad. So Coach Jack can get up real quick. So we'll do the same thing. He'll pop that back foot on the chair there, or we obviously use a bench in the weight room. I want him to literally try to get this back shin vertical, okay? So we're gonna try to tuck that knee all the way back to where I want this back shin, go ahead and get in there, coach. I want this back shin straight up, straight down, okay? So that's where we're gonna start, all right? I want this foot relatively tight to start, and I literally want him to push his butt back, okay? So he's gonna push his hips back, he's gonna flex his butt cheek, and I'm gonna extract. So we're just gonna do 10 butt cheek squeezes. So he's gonna flex the glute 10 times, push your butt back, push your butt back. Okay, and I'm gonna keep coaching the whole time. And I might even do this and push his butt back with his foot, and he just flexes his butt cheek. So 10 times, he's gonna contract, relax, all right? Now this complex is the new one I'm messing with. I like this right now. We're gonna go straight from 10 of these to where we're gonna just shift forward and go into a long base position. So I want this foot to float forward, float, keep going, float, 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 float. Now he's gonna let the hips come through. We're gonna get a bigger angle on that back knee. He's still gonna fight to keep neutral posture. Now this is gonna hit a little bit lower on that hip flexor. Now flex the butt cheek, coach. You feel that a little bit lower? Okay, so now we're just working the lower piece of the hip flexor here. All right, so 10 and 10, same thing. When I say 10 and 10, I mean 10 butt cheek squeezes, 10 glute squeezes. We're gonna flex the glute 10 times with a vertical shin, and then we're gonna flex it 10 times with a loose shin. The biggest thing, like I said, we don't wanna hyperextend that back. We wanna really, really flex that glute, okay? So you do that, do a couple sets of that. How's that hip feel, coach?
How's
Okay.
that back feel?
So that's probably one of our favorite, and we'll superset that with squat. That's probably the most basic thing that I can tell you guys to take and go. I really like the 10-10, but I mean, like I said, it's you got to do it the right way. Butt cheek squeezes. If you don't squeeze the butt cheek, you got no chance. You're not doing the right thing. So why don't we take that right to the Bulgarian split squat then? Okay, so like I said, we wanna have a very similar modality of movement as we do in our regular squat here. Okay, Harris, you want to just kind of vocalize and verbalize?
Manipulate?
Yeah, what did Hickson said last night? Manipulate?
Yeah, so I mean, everything starts with the same. So we'll go into a body weight Bulgarian, and like Coach Sleeve said, that those shoelaces are going to be facing down on the bench, and this just allows our guys to create more mobility in that hip, allow them to get down a little deeper than if they were locked off. And once again, like, yeah, it shows immobilities, but how we do things, it also increases mobility as well at the same time. So we're just going to have them get a body weight Bulgarian, nothing changes. Lock in our lats, and we still hip hinge. So the first movement our guys are going to do is they're going to hip hinge, and then it's just straight down from there. And you can see that puts you in the position we've been talking about. So my knee is over my ankle, freaking locked in back here, I'm tight, everything's open, my scaps are set, and we're just sitting here.
So this is, like I said, first week we start ISO, right? 10-second hold. Second week we go 15-second hold, and then we'll start working into repetitions. What's a big thing we talk about with the knee? This front knee, guys. Okay, so what are we trying to create there? Torque, right? So we see that everywhere we go, right? Lateral lunge, Bulgarian split squat, regular bilateral squat, front squat, whatever it may be. We're gonna always constantly coach torque here. So he's torquing out. We don't want that knee to come in. Okay, that's not what we want to see. We want to see that knee torque out. Stand up, take a second, coach. Okay, so once again, we're really, because we're coaching everything simultaneously, we don't have to over-coach it by the time week 3, week 4. You guys have seen it in every single hip hinge move they've done, okay? So the first thing we're gonna tell him to do is before he does anything is what? Hip hinge, hips back, hips go back, sit down. We're gonna force that knee out on the way down, on the way up. We want constant torque, constant tension there, correct? Chest, what's our chest position? We want chest upright, we want a neutral chest position. Eyes are where? Straight ahead, neutral position. We're driving through what on the way up? Sitting back on the way down. So, I mean, like I say, it's like you wanna be more detailed with it, but everything's just crossed over, right? I mean, it's like you guys, it's the same book, different chapter, right? And it's just like you're hearing the same thing over and over again. That's kind of the point, right? Whether we're doing a lateral lunge, Bulgarian split squat, back squat, front squat, overhead squat, like our coaching cues are the same, right? Little different tweaks here and there, but that's the biggest thing I recommend you guys is you guys are coaching things. Try to keep your coaching cues consistent. Try to help things have a lot of crossover, and you're gonna help yourself out in the back end. What questions do we have on the Bulgarian split squat?
Well, on Bulgarian, that back leg, so you guys start to swing that leg out instead of straight back down. So instead of being straight, they'll start to go like cockeyed a little bit. And another thing, some guys will hip hinge at the beginning, but instead of continuing to drive that butt back, they go straight down or start to push forward on that.
No, there's no doubt. You're going to see the immobilities flare up everywhere. And, so our postseason program always has a ton of this stuff in it because, if you just got done playing, 14 weeks of football, I want to see what issues you have. Okay, folks' right ankle and left hip, they're not back to where they need to be yet. Let's get him on this high needs program. So we're working around it, and that's the thing too is we talk about FMS here, and I think FMS is a fantastic tool. I just want to be more efficient with our FMS. So for me, I tell our coaches, I want coaches that can FMS while you're coaching. I want you to be like, I don't want to have to go through a screen for me to be able to say, all right, Harris has a hip issue. Now, maybe if we have a guy that does have a hip issue, maybe we'll bring him in individually and be, okay, we gotta get the details of this hip issue. Let's FMS him and see exactly what's going on. That might be a particular thing, but I wanna be able to go through this technique school, and if I'm doing all these ISO hold positions for 2 straight weeks, I should be able to figure out what issues my team has, correct? And that's what we're trying to do, and that's what, like I said, whether it be a thoracic spine mobility issue, whether it be a hip mobility issue, whether it be an ankle mobility issue, whether it be a glute activation issue or a muscle activation issue, whether it be a muscular pattern issue, whether it's, you know, whatever it may be, I want coaches that can figure that stuff out while they're coaching. You know, like it's just what I believe, and I know it's possible because what we do every freaking year, and we've done a great job of it. And then obviously, you know, you guys saw this summer, you guys obviously, but that's what we have a high needs program for. So we have a high needs ankle mobility program. We have a high needs hip mobility program. So we can take care of those things and really isolate those movements, and then you really start to see them cross over throughout those things. But you know, I think starting from the basics is, you know, hopefully you guys have seen how essential that is and how much that helps, and especially, you know, with you know, folks as coaches, the top tier with me, our kangaroos or our zips, our top tier guys, and by the time they get up there, like I said, it's just automatic. You know what I mean? And you've really gotten a chance to see that. And you know, everything they do, and it just helps the coaching cues so much. Now I'm just saying, okay, hip hinge, and they know what the hell a hip hinge is. You know, those things are very important. What else? What are the questions? Comments?
When we first when we were doing Bulgarians last year, we had one of our coaching cues were kind of putting your toes in the bench, and we had a longer base, and then we kind of switched it up to having a more narrow base, to having the shoestrings down. You want to talk about that real quick?
I mean,
why you switched it up?
Yeah, so what we used to do, and it was almost more of like a lunge position type Bulgarian split squat, where I used to have them cock the back foot because I wanted them to really have to elongate that opposite working hip, and I put them in a very long strided position, which is how I learned how to do Bulgarian split squats when I first got into strength and conditioning, and it's good. I like it. There's nothing wrong with it. It's just why I started reading a lot of Mike Boyle stuff, and that's one thing that I took from him, was just the compressed version of the Bulgarian split squat. And for me, it had such a greater crossover to, like I said, it looks like a squat, you know. Whereas the reason I really didn't, not that I didn't like it, I just wanted to really try. You know, this was when we used to, like I said, when we were at a freaking long base with the Bulgarian split squats. The back toe was cocked and put up. So I said, like, it was you're having to freaking really mobilize that back hip, which has, you know, it has good reasons, and I definitely understood them. But for me, I felt like I had to have different coaching cues. You know, I felt like those coaching cues that we used on back squat didn't necessarily work as well on the Bulgarian split squat when we were the elongated version. So read a bunch of Mike Boyle stuff, and I just started trying it myself, and I just said, you know, I think this is going to have more crossover to our actual squat. I think it's going to really help isolate truly and make it a single leg movement. And I'm like, you know, we do lunges for a reason, to put us in that position, and to have that long levered position. Why are we doing that with our split squats too? You know, so that was really the main thing. I mean, it wasn't like an earth-shattering, you know, reason, or I just felt like it had more crossover our squat. I wanted to do more of a single leg, you know, squat, whether it been a compressed Bulgarian split squat, maybe a pistol squat, but I wanted that movement to be more, you know, truly unilateral in nature, and have more of a crossover to our squat. So we made the change. I thought it was easier to coach. I thought the guys grasped it better, and I think we got a lot more out of it.
I think it's become one of our better movements too.
No doubt. We coached the piss out of it so bad, right?
Yeah, we got 2 guys in the developmental hitting 120-pound dumbbells,
150.
150-pound dumbbells.
Yeah. 200, yeah, so 300 pounds in their hands.
Yeah.
Doing Bulgarian split squats. So no, we got some strong dudes, and I've liked it a lot, you know, for sure. What else?
was thinking about the guys that have moved up from Joey's to Zips now, our top tier. I think like the biggest thing we figured out was just the importance of slow cooking it. You know, you talk about that a lot, but just understanding that it's okay for these guys to kind of stay where they are for, 4 weeks at a time until they're perfected. And you do watch those guys squat. I peek over every now and again to watch the Zips go at it. And those dudes are pause squatting 385 pounds, 400 pounds, and there's no valgus. Their chests are up, they're neutral. Like, it's just, they look great and they're moving really freaking well. And you can see it on the field.
Yeah, and what I think of whenever I think of that stuff is like Craig Sowers, who was one of my first bosses, and what the biggest thing that from his interview that I remember, that he just I don't know why he said it in a different way than I've heard him talk about before, but he's like, I can get anybody a 20-pound PR whenever the hell I want. Give me 4 weeks, I get you 20-pound PR, but it's about what comes after that. After that, what happens? Would you rather have a 20-pound PR? Twice in your career, or would you rather have a 5-pound PR every week for your entire 4 years that you're here? And I think that's the thing to remember is like we get caught up in wanting to get these kids strong so fast, and it's really not that challenging. Like you think about when you only have 5 or 6 weeks with the NFL guys that I have to come back here and train. I can get those kids strong, fast and shit, but I only have the 6 weeks to do it. But it's just showing you like you can do it. You can definitely get them there. But when you have kids for 4 years, it's not about making those 6-week changes. It's about making if I can have you gain 5 pounds on your squat every week for the freaking 120 weeks that you're here at this university or whatever it may be, whatever your time is here. Which I'll let you decide what you want. You know what I mean? Like I'm gonna take the 5-pound increments every freaking week. And so just slow cooking them is what helps Ben. And it's like, these kids, they get done with a heavy squat workout and they're like, man, I could have done more weight. And I'm like, yeah, I know you could have, but you beat last week by 5 pounds. Let's just keep beating it by 5 pounds every week. And to see, you said now they're up there, they're pause squatting 405, and 12 weeks ago, they were doing freaking ISO bodyweight squats, and it's just like you see those slow but gradual improvements, and it's what it's all about. Correcting joint dysfunction, solidifying motor patterns, putting them in positions to be successful and really not just have strength, but be able to have the ability to exhibit their strength, and not bleed out force in 10,000 million different directions.
It's gonna be exciting to see our travel guys too. At the end of the season, like we've done a lot with them, and they're still strong towards the end of the season. But as soon as the season's over with, and they get into this program, and to see them hold those bodyweight positions, like their body's gonna be beat up.
It's just, we talk about it every year, but the freaking toll that the season takes out on these guys, it's incredible. I mean, it's just freaking incredible when you get these guys back and you start moving them through, and how challenging just doing an ISO bodyweight squat is after just getting banged on for, and you got to think about camp too. So camp was 5 weeks this year, so you have the 5 weeks that led up to the 14 weeks of playing and practicing.
You really didn't even get like a true 5 weeks.
Yeah.
Right. So you're talking about 20 straight weeks of just banging on.
Or they didn't have that much time off from camp going in, from camp going into the season.
Yeah, I mean our coach was pushing pretty hard.
Yeah,
so.
we didn't have a lot of time off. Period.
Yes, I mean that's a whole nother thing too, and that's why the first week we're combining kind of technique school with hypertrophy, and there's a reason obviously for that, so we can FMS them and see what's going on with them as well. What else?
I think the post meetings that we have after the list to compare like what immobilities we're having with our individual guys, like kind of lets us accumulate what that 80% is, and lets us figure out like what we need to add in or what we need to change in order to get the rest of those guys caught up with each other. I think that's huge for us to really get those guys going in the right direction.
We also, another thing with the technique stuff that we're doing, like we're also talking about a lot of movement and slow cooking them, and the fact that our guys do that before practice, a full padded practice, where they have to run full speed and have all those plays on the scout team to help out our starters, and they give our starters, like talk about our scout offense, our scout offensive line are giving those started as a little bit of hell after having all that weight, holding those positions, and focusing on movement for an hour and a half before practice even starts. So doing more with minimal.
Yeah. All right, well, yeah, I mean, that's, like I said, I think that's kind of puts to bed the squat progressions, bilateral, unilateral. Next week, part 4, so we'll go through all of our upper body stuff and just how it all ties in. So obviously you guys have seen the upper back progressions, how much we emphasize setting the scaps when we get into our pressing stuff. So next week we'll cover all of, the upper body stuff and how to set the scaps, why it's so important, kind of my unique philosophy on bench pressing, which I'm sure there's going to be just freaking chaos about. I'm a hips, hands guy, so obviously the USAW doesn't teach bench like we do as far as firing their hips when they're pressing, but I'll explain all that stuff next week as well. So we'll finish up our technique school, so you'll have, like I said, you guys have seen it, but we'll kind of break it down piece by piece, so everybody has an idea of exactly what it's like to go through all 4 weeks of our technique school program, how we progress the cleans, the unilateral squat, the bilateral squat, and all of our different press variations, and what our criteria are before we let guys even put a bar in their hands. So we'll finish up next week with part 4, and that'll finish up technique school. Cool?
Cool.
Cincinnati Marriott North, thank you.